So I just want to let the audience know this pod and probably the next two is going to be a series of 3 episodes. So please make sure to check out the next episode and the one to follow. But yeah, it's all about branding. We're gonna, like R.I.P. Kobe Bean Bryant, but we're gonna go back to the basics. We're gonna explain branding, what a brand is, as my brother AD said. We're gonna explain what marketing is, and we're gonna talk about the history of it. We're also gonna talk about some good rebranding moments in advertising, some bad ones. I have a few. And then, but yeah, I wanted to set everybody up to make sure they check out the next few episodes, so there's going to be more information as we go on.
We here, right? We just kind of, we're doing our thing. It's the new recording of the day. We're here to talk about brands. Before I think we get into that, let's just briefly introduce ourselves again, just to the audience who's first time listening. And I think how we can start this off, man, is just talk just who you are, give your name and maybe just say something around like a personal brand that kind of represents you.
Yeah.
And it could be a brand, it could be a product, it could be whatever.
Yeah. I'm going to start. It's your boy, Tony Stallion. If you want the backstory to that name, listen to Ad Bros episode 1, starting at 30 seconds. It's fully explained there. I think a brand that I kind of closely align with, I'll say Apple. And the reason I'll say Apple is because I feel like they have, for me, I know there's Android people out there, but for me, Apple has like a nice ecosystem, and I like how a lot of their designs are beautiful, but a little bit minimal. Love their stores. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Apple. I'm sure that people will say that's elitist, but
that's cool. Yeah. This your boy AD representing ATL by way of Decatur, all the way from Brooklyn. And I would say that my brand, or I guess more or less product, I would say that would be is probably a screwdriver. And I'm gonna say a reason why. Screwdriver is a tool, right? And any screwdriver can be a Sears screwdriver, it can be Craftsman, it can be Home Depot, doesn't matter. It works. It is. You can use it for multiple things. You can use it to build something. You can probably use it for some crime. I don't think you should use it for that. But nonetheless, a screwdriver is like a multi-purpose tool that more or less kind of feels like, a Swiss knife without being a knife, but it kind of has jagged edges too. But yeah, I would be that. And I'm not going to really just say the brand.
You should have went first, because now I want to change mine. But anyway.
It's cool.
No, you don't got to change. You can stand on it. Oh, you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done.
All right, cool. It's your boy Easy Rose, Brownsville's finest. I think a brand that represents me, I would say, is BMW. It's just performance luxury. Simple as that. Straight to the point.
With it.
That's one of my brands later on in the pod I'm going to talk about.
I like that, man. Rose always going to be smooth with it, You got the performance, you like the overall, aesthetic of the brand.
The ultimate driving machine.
There you go. Yeah. Have it in my way.
Started out as airplanes, right? Engines, and turned into a car. I dig that. You're all about performance. It makes sense you as a media guy.
Yeah, I mean, even from a media perspective, we have to make sure we're aligned to whether if it's KPIs, and then we are measured. Our performance through media is measured against those KPIs. So whenever we're going back and having conversations with clients, they are looking to see if we are who we say we are, and we're doing what we say we're doing. Are we optimizing? Are we reaching out to partners and getting things done? So, but we do it in a very elegant and having conversations in an eloquent way. So, performance luxury. There you go.
Well, I want to take the time to actually kind of set this conversation up. I know for the next couple of conversations and pods, we want to really bring this idea of the brand to the forefront, right? Because, we got everybody nowadays saying that I'm a brand, or brands are reinventing themselves, or brands are either actually being phased out, like they're disappearing, right? Like we can even talk about that. But I do think the idea of what a brand is, I think we should kind of like take a step back, maybe talk about the historical aspect of what brand is, how it changed over a period of time, and what does it really represent today.
Maybe after we should also revisit, once we kind of go through branding, maybe we should revisit the brand thing and see, are you still a screwdriver? Are you still BMW?
Oh no, I'm still a screwdriver. Okay. Right now. Like, I can believe that. Brands are only representative of people in terms of how they identify. And you can always, identify with multiple brands, right? And that's the beauty of branding. And if you think about what a brand really started from, well, I think a lot of people really don't know, right? Like, let's just take a step back. A lot of people think brands are just, companies with nice, beautiful logos and jingles and, certain kind of look and feel and great kind of commercials. And yes, brands are all of that, right? But the term branding started
like physical branding,
the actual physical nature of putting a mark on something to identify it as something. That started from farm animals, right? So it's funny, like, you take like computing, that started from somebody quilting essentially, right? So this idea of taking threads in and out of a loop and creating like some kind of like garment that created binary code. That code turned into what we now know as computing. So that literally started from a craftsperson kind of quilting or creating a garment. Branding, as we know, like again, started from farmers. These guys would have, a ton of livestock, and they would want to identify the livestock from being either stolen by them, or if it was stolen, like, hey, that's my cow or sheep or whatever. It also allowed the farmer to show potential buyers the quality of what they were selling, right? So that literally, again, started from farming, right? This idea of like early civilization. I think you mentioned 2000 BC or something like that. And that's like the historical start of it. It evolves to this guy by the name of like Edward Bernays. That's the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And he took branding and made it a little bit more modern by inventing what we call propaganda. Propaganda was more or less used to get people to sign up for the army during World War I and a lot of other conflicts back then. But his uses of it too allowed this idea of taking a brand and using it to empower people's thinking. Specifically at the time, he used it to empower women to smoke because it was illegal for women to smoke back in like the early 1900s. Yeah. So he came up with this kind of cool campaign that really spoke to like this thing in women, like, hey, by you smoking, it says that you're this. And if you think about that approach to a brand, that literally begot modern day advertising. So that's kind of like the historical, like, like a quick second or so of how branding actually got started and how it evolved. And it goes right into modern day times now. But what is a brand today?
To be fair, all of this can be found on Google. But you're here.
Yeah, but most people don't.
You're here listening to us.
People go to TikTok and Instagram.
So we're gonna take you through the motion. I had to go back to university time and think and do some research and looking up online. But just in a simple way, a brand is just a company's identity. It's kind of like their story, the story of that company, their identity, who they are. They kind of use it as a way to differentiate from competitors. Nowadays, as you mentioned, AD is used to sell products. But I think, if you look at it in a broad spectrum, brand could kind of be anything. It could be you, it could be a country, it could be a team, sports team. I think the goal really of a brand is really just to kind of company or your thing, just kind of stick in the minds of the people. And when you do that, you want to be easily identified. You feel me? And that's and we'll get into the weeds of things, but that's where you kind of get into logos, brand logos, colors, like you said, jingles,
mnemonics.
Ooh, damn, that's going deep.
That's a good back.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Big word.
But yeah, that's a good one. And then
tone too. It's copy.
Tone, music. Yeah, it's a lot.
Psychodemographics.
There's a lot. That's when you get into copyright, because you can't just steal. Well, you can steal another brand, but that leads to legal issues or just the audience not feeling you, which I'll get into later on in a couple of brands. But yeah, I think I don't know if you have any. I was gonna jump into branding because I know like people kind of mix and match. But if you want to speak.
I think just to touch on brands and appreciate that. to before springboarding into brandings, I feel like brands are an expectation that comes with a company or an entity's uniqueness and set values, right? Like, I think for a brand to work, like there must be a covenant and a set of a belief system within between, whether if it's the product or the brand and its audience and its consumers. Brands give people choices and possibilities across categories. I'm just kind of taking it outside of what we do, but let's say if it's a dating market, right? We might have a woman who might be in the market for a man, right? But from that perspective, she could be looking for a man, but she can narrow it down from a personality type, right? Does she want an alpha man? Does she want a beta man? Does she want a omega? You know what I mean? Like, does she want a delta, right? These are different category types that the same concept, brands like kind of tapping into those options and those choices, right? But I'll continue.
I was listening to another interview where someone said that alpha beta shit is not real. It might be brand. It might be marketing. It's not real in the wild. The way. Well, this is not that type of podcast, but the way other podcasts talk about that shit. But anyway, I think what you said is it kind of leads to my next point of like, branding. Branding is super important just because that's kind of what gets your target audience interested in you. It's like what sells, you to them. And it's like I said earlier, it kind of makes you memorable.
But is it selling, or is it more about top of mind? Because what sells is coupons.
They're always selling.
Well, you're always selling.
It's essentially campaigning. You're campaigning yourself. You're campaigning a product. And just to jump back to your point, right? And I think that's a lot of it is how we think, right? Because you brought up a really good point as it relates like alpha, delta, sigma. Like, is that even a real thing? And at the end of the day, you're just a man, right? But they call it's identified as like a social sexual hierarchy, right? So now it's different categories, it's different layers, right? So now you can kind of sell that, and it's a way for people to kind of categorize you and put you into a specific box, and people can say, oh, well, I like that, I don't like that. And I feel like that kind of builds on from a brand's perspective. Like, you have choices. I want a soft drink. I could go Coca-Cola, I could go Pepsi, so on and so forth. So I think it all kind of ties back into each other.
You actually just brought up something. I'm not gonna get super deep on it, but you, Paul. I'm not
you
gonna
don't have to do pause, bro. We're grown as fuck.
I'm not gonna get too much into it. But you brought up a good point about being top of mind, because I think we make so many decisions in a day that like the importance of branding and kind of having a brand helps us every day, because it helps us make a quick decision without overthinking it. Like, I mean, I'm not going to shout them out because they're not sponsoring, but we all have the same water bottle here, but we all came from different houses and places, but we all have the same water brand, we all like brands like, I'll shout them out because I love them, Polo, Ralph Lauren. And it's just like, you could have picked up any sweater, but for you to easily identify like, yo, this is what I want to hear. I mean, even though Tremaine left, but I have a bunch of hats at home, but I decided to pick my Supreme hat on. So it's just like brands help you ease. Like when I was getting dressed this morning, it helped me easily. I mean that in colors, but it helped me easily identify like, yo, I want to wear that. I want to look like that. I want to feel like that.
Well, interesting.
And that's because I believe brands is storytelling in the form of turnkey signals, right? Yeah. So the goal is to drive a connection and evoke an emotion. And that's the foundation of a brand, to draw a connection, drive an emotion. And what we were talking about earlier is to be a part of the conversation, as well as, remain top of mind to eventually deliver a call to action.
Right. I mean, it's funny because you just brought up something about the water bottle, right? I mean, water is water, but is it? Because water from a bodega is one thing. It costs one thing. Water from, I guess, an airport is going to cost something different. Water at a social club or some kind of, cool event is going to cost premium, right? So you look at brand also can be broken down to like location, access, and even just idea of premium, even though it all tastes the same. Water is water, right? Depending on how it's filtered, depending on who's selling it. But at the end of the day, it's still H2O.
Yo,
Right?
wait,
And
quick
this
question.
type-
How long you been in New York?
I've been in New York 17.
17 years?
Mhm.
Okay. Because the way you said water sound very New York.
Oh, really?
I was just going to say, like,
Because if I say it from the South, water.
nah, because I'm not going to. I was just talking to somebody about water. Like New Yorkers say, we say, want some water, some coffee. But anyway, you
Oh,
just sound,
look
you
at
got
this guy.
you got your New York accent.
Oh,
I
That's
just
okay.
wanted
because
to
I feel
say,
like people
yeah.
from New York, we drop the R.
Yeah.
A lot of things.
Yeah.
Hater.
Anyway,
Water.
that's the New York segment
Look at
for
this
this
guy.
pod. We can move on.
Credentialing people. But yeah, man, I do think, this idea that brand is not just one thing or another, but it does plays out depending on where you're consuming that brand too, right? But let's move on to like the next thing.
Oh, real quick, before we move into the next thing, just because I know it's the word marketing is used interchangeably with branding, but just wanted to say marketing is really just the tactics you use. Like once you have your brand, once you know what your strategy is in terms of what you want to do, once you know who your audience is, then marketing is just the tactics. Like, all right, how am I going to get these people to listen to me? Or how am I going to get these people to come to my site, to listen to this podcast, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, marketing is, like you said, it's the means of getting things out. PR is the conversation around it.
Right.
Branding is basically the principles and the storytelling, and all three of those things, more or less work well as like a system that basically engage the audience. And hey, it's funny that we're talking about this, and I'm like a design historical nerd motherfucker, right? One of the first individuals who actually took all three of those different things we just talked about and wrote it into like a consumer engagement was P.T. Barnum, the circus dude.
Hey.
Right? P.T. Barnum would come to town. He'd have some PR to say, hey, the circus coming. And he had PR talking about the circus is coming. Marketing would actually get the word out. And the advertising of all the different things that you can check out at the circus, whereas the, 400-pound man or the bearded woman and these weird people was the storytelling. So P.T. Barnum, which is funny, we talked a lot about that in school, was one of the first masters of like all three of those things at one time. He took branding, marketing, and PR and used that to promote the circus. I think in today's world, maybe he'll be advertising genius, or maybe he get Me Too for all these weird things he had in the circus. Who knows, right? But that's
Or
a
he
lot.
might be running a political campaign.
He might be running the country right now. Who
Running
knows?
the circus.
Who knows? But I think the next thing we can talk about, right? If we're saying brands that are in, kind of, close to our heart. Well, what are some brands that you guys can remember from your childhood that, invokes this sense of nostalgia and that kind of engaged you a little bit? I know for me personally, some of the things I remember from my childhood was like Nintendo, it was Sega, it was McDonald's, it was definitely Adidas, because Nike didn't really get really big until Jordan Brand. And I think our first iteration of Nike really getting like super big in the neighborhood was like, we call them the Dope Man Nikes. More and more people call them they really call the Cortez Nikes. In the South, we call them the Dope Man Nikes because the Dope Man roll, right?
Los Angeles, I know it's big out the Cortez.
Yeah, but we call them Dope Man Nikes. But they got big in like the late 80s. But prior to that, it was mostly Adidas. I mean, even Run DMC had my Adidas, right? So those are some of the brands I can remember, or like Trapper Keeper. That's a little folder that we would use to bring out homework home from school. What are like some of those brands that you guys can remember that kind of define your whole childhood?
I'll say for myself, as a kid, I played a lot of sports. So, I was trying to tap in with whatever sports that I was into, mostly basketball at the time, and football. I tried to tap into watching games, going to games if I could, but around the games, surrounding the games, there was marketing and advertising. So I would say more so like Pepsi, what they used to do with Shaq, Shack Attack, and then I would also say like Nike, like Deion Sanders was like a huge in
Right.
for my childhood.
So it's like what, early 90s.
Yeah. So I would say that, as well as Jordan was always around. He was always like really impactful.
I was gonna say, like, I don't really have a lot of I can't think of a lot of brands when I was a kid, but I was gonna say Nike, Jordan, I think is probably like the biggest brand that I could remember. I know you said, like, I didn't grow up in the era where Adidas was popping. Like, when I grew up, it was only Nike.
Yeah.
And I wore Nike. I don't think I wore I maybe wore a Fila once or twice, but like I wore Nike probably until let me think. I don't think I got a different shoe brand until college. So I wore Nike from a kid till at least 18 before I stepped out the box and tried a new shoe. And it wasn't even about brand loyalty. It was just like, I just like Nike. I just like the design. Thought it was simple. No shade to Adidas. I know that's how they.
But I will say Nike in
yeah.
New York, I feel like it got really popular with the uptowns, right? And this is like late 80s. Going into the 90s.
But in the 90s, I think there was a boom in just color, vibrancy, and we was rocking the Bo Jacksons.
I remember the Bo Jacksons.
I remember when I know uptowns were probably always Air Force Ones were always
I had
hot.
a song.
But I remember for me when I started seeing it more. I want to say like 8th grade, and I was like, oh, these are nice, simple, nice, blah blah. But yeah, for me, I would say it just kind of started with just the vibrant sneakers. Like there's a bunch that I probably don't know the actual names for, but if I saw them, I could be like, yo, I remember that when I was a kid. But
yeah, and then and I feel like we're still kind of building on sports, right? Like with a lot of those brands, and that's how come we lean into like.
What about food? What are some of the food?
Oh,
brands
you know what? Damn, this is gonna sound like a New York pod, but like I would say Nike and the Yankees.
Look at this guy,
the New York Yankees.
You Jay-Z or some shit?
Was but New York Yankees was a brand. Like I remember going to my first baseball game. It was a Mets game. Then I went to the Yankee game, and you just felt a different energy. And then, like,
but Jay said he the one made the hat popular.
He could say what he wants.
I think he can back that up. But what you was saying?
No, I was saying, kind of diving back into sports, right?
Yeah.
Like, still going on that journey as a kid, watching sports. Like, it kind of branched off into drinks. So, like Gatorade was big back then. It's like, like Mike.
Right.
I want to be like Mike. Like that's a Gatorade commercial.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Also still too with Bo Knows, Bo Jackson.
Right.
I think you did mention Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
But, as well as like
Bo Diddley was in that commercial.
Yeah. Also too, I think Larry Johnson, Grandmama.
Oh yeah.
Converse.
And it's funny that you say that because like just because I feel like the 90s, there was a lot of sports and entertainment was all intertwined because I didn't really get into sports until I got older, but I still remember all that because a lot of that was infused in shows like Family Matters, Fresh Prince, Wayne's Brothers, and that's what I was watching. So like even though I wasn't, I knew about like Jordan and the Bulls, but like even though I wasn't always watching sports, like I knew about a lot of that because what was in Family Matters. And some of the stuff they talked about, especially, the show taking place in Chicago. And then, like Wayne's Brothers, Jamie Foxx show, that was probably a little bit more early 2000s. But all of that was infused in it. So, like, the fashion and all that. And I was like, oh, snap. So like, I'm just saying that to say, like, same page, same vibe.
Yeah, It had a footprint, right? And it was like this character that kept reoccurring. So you had Anthony Hardaway with the Penny Hardaway, and you had Little Penny, Chris Rock, the doll. I don't know if you remember that. But, it was just it was like one of those things. It was like it's popular. I guess they did market research and saying like, oh, this thing is working, so let's bring it back and let's try to reinvent it every time.
How were you guys introduced to those brands? Because commercials did one thing, Friends obviously was another thing. Magazines were a big thing back then, right? It was no social, no internet as we know it in terms of the public domain. But how are you guys introduced to it? I know for me, like even the Maxell tapes as an example for me, I get introduced to that because everybody was recording things off the radio on a boombox back in the day. So that was a big brand with my youth and my growing up.
I think in New York, Rose, you could check me on this if I'm wrong, but to me, I think the funnel of being exposed to brands comes from two environments. I would say what you're engaging in, TV, where you hang out. Like for me, I would see a lot of stuff on Coliseum Block, Queens. And then when I went to high school, downtown Brooklyn.
I'll be square.
Yeah, I'll be square. That's how I learned about red monkey jeans. You heard? Like, if you know, you know.
Monkey jeans?
Red monkey jeans.
Red monkey.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was like the first.
Gotta be New York.
It was the not. I want to say the first, but it was the first jeans I remember being like $300, $500 jeans.
I think they were after Evisu.
Okay. Yeah. Evisu was probably first. Japan
that I can remember.
Yeah, and then Red Monkey was crazy, but yeah, I want to say it comes from that because like I'll see, you're a little young sometimes. You don't have you may or may not be working, and then you see cats downtown Brooklyn or Coliseum block, and you're like, damn, that's fly. And then they got all the stores. You got Moe's. Shouts to Moe's.
Moe's is gone.
I know. No, not Modell's.
Oh, not Modell's, right?
It's a sneaker store called Moe's.
Is it around?
That I think there's still one on Queens Boulevard, but I know there used to be one in Coliseum, but Coliseum closed down. RIP to them. But and in downtown Brooklyn, yeah, it's just like to me, downtown Brooklyn was like the mecca because you got the sneaker stores. That's where I first learned about Prada's, the American Cup sneaker. That's when you see people. You see the gold shop. You see people with the fronts. You see chains. It's like all that is just like soaking in your mind, and then you like. And
so
then
most of the brands you're talking about are things that are more like give like a public visual persona of a person, like how you style yourself, right?
Yeah,
that's something that was pretty important.
Yeah, but I think to answer it, just to bring it full circle, to answer your question, that's when you were saying that's where I'm first introduced.
Okay,
being outside,
right?
Being in the home and seeing it on TV, and then I guess being able to touch it in a sneaker store or in a chain or in a jewelry store and see it in person. You're like, oh, I can get this.
What's some of your early electronic brands? I mean, because the brand that became synonymous with electronics.
No,
was like
shout out to Super Nintendo. First of all, shout out to Nintendo. That was the first one.
No, but which? Because
electronic brands.
Yeah, but you saying Nintendo, but which Nintendo? It was NES for me, but I'm sure when you was a kid, it was like a certain Nintendo, like the 64.
Nah, it was the first Nintendo.
You had an NES?
I got an older brother. He's your age.
Okay.
So he didn't want to give us the Nintendo, but he gave it to me and my middle brother. And then we got the Super Nintendo.
So you guys were blowing in the cartridges to make sure they were okay.
And then I'm from the old school. Then PlayStation. I remember, speaking of branding, that's music, that sound.
Yeah.
Mnemonic.
Which we're gonna get into that.
There you go. That's gonna be the next PlayStation, and I never did Sega.
Never did Sega? Sega didn't last that long. It
was cool. It was
good in the 80s.
It was a little niche.
It was good in the 80s.
Like the Dreamcast.
It was good in the 80s. Kind of went into the 90s, a little bit into the 2000s, but it got acquired. The whole catalog now is owned by Nintendo now.
Yeah. And then the last one I'll say, and Rose, I'll let you jump in. Game Boy. I think that was big. Like it was bulky.
Nintendo, right?
Yeah, that was under Nintendo. Game Boy and then Game Boy Color. But now that I think about it, Game Boys are probably prepping us kids for being on phones, what I'm saying?
It look like a phone, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's damn near the size of an Android or a tablet.
I think for me, it was to go back to the original question, like my introduction, a lot of it very similar to Tony, being in the house, seeing commercials, but then also just being outside on my block. Back then, just seeing those reoccurring logos, reoccurring brands, worn by if it's older people like Fila. Fila was a huge brand back in the day, especially the Fila headbands. Like if you had a Fila headband, I wanted one so bad. I couldn't get my mom to get me one. She didn't know where to get one. But like the older dudes on my block, they would be, on a 10-speed and wearing Fila headbands. So it's like that introduction.
Fila was very, very fly back in the 80s.
Very fly.
And
you know what I mean?
I think it was a certain kind of cat world Fila going into the 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was that. Then it was also still on my block. I think it was like the infusion of everyone, that sense of a community where everyone knew each other. We traded. So we talked about games, right? I remember trading video games with people. Like, all right, you hold it for a week, then give it back. I hold your game. We just swap games, right? And I think it was just that sense of community. Even I'm from Brownsville, right? So polo was heavy in Brownsville. Right. I mean, not as much anymore. I think with the newer generation, they don't really. I think they call him polo uncwear. No, they call him uncwear. Yeah. It's cool.
That's disrespectful.
It's cool because I would rather have polo and uncwear versus when Crocs bonnets and hoodies outside. So I mean, if we went to
talk to him,
but yeah. In closing, I would just say like the infusions like on my block, going to school and just seeing these reoccurring, whether if it's products or brands, and hearing kids talk about it, and it kind of gave me an interest. Like, all right, what's going on with that? What's that about? And
So
then,
essentially, you're saying that brands, even then and now, this idea of it kind of getting circulated is still word of mouth,
right?
right?
Exactly.
So a couple of influencers kind of checked it out, or we call them influencers now, but it was like dudes in the back then was the most popular ones on your block or your neighborhood. They don't want to start rocking the brands first, and then everybody just kind of follow. Still word of mouth, almost kind of like some would say guerrilla, right? Like, hey, this is not like us directly target this group, but a few people on the block started rocking it, then everybody started rocking it. Now, whole nother demographics wearing a brand or rocking whatever brand that was never really targeted in the first place.
Right. And then now that I'm older, I'm thinking like, was this on purpose? Like, did they get it from another block, or did these older cats get it from their school? And like, how did this thing become the
how did
thing?
it start? Yeah,
I mean, I think a lot of it too is like music videos. I was very, very young, but my dad used to watch Video Music Box because we didn't have cable.
Right.
And that introduction with Ralph McDaniels and these music videos, these rappers, Nice and Smooth, Gangstar. I'm a little kid knowing Big Daddy Kane songs, and like, you spoke about the gold, Tony, like I'm seeing the gold dripping. So that kind of cultivated me, and also too, trying to be original too, because back then, although we could wear the same brands, we couldn't do it the same way. We had to come a little bit different.
You gotta freak it a little bit.
Yeah,
you gotta put your,
you know what I mean?
your own, I don't want to say swag, but your own spin on it. Yeah.
I mean, just like, obviously New York is synonymous with wearing Timbs, right? But I saw my brothers, and they're like 10 years older than me, wearing Timberlands, not the work boot in the 80s. They was wearing Timberland moccasins, right? Like the Sebagos and the other, like, moccasin style of Timberlands.
I don't think we did that.
Nah, New York never did that. But Timberlands was something that was a little bit more middle America, right? And a lot of people wore not the work boots, they wore the other Timberlands. Again, like the moccasins or the camping shoes or something like that. And that's the shit my brother wore. It was kind of preppy dudes, right? That was like wearing the prep style back then was huge in the 80s. And I saw it as a young dude wearing it. And I think obviously New York made Timberlands actually more popular because it wasn't a known brand in the hood anywhere, right? And then, you guys wearing the work boots, the Butters or whatever. That really made the brand super strong in a non-intentional way again, right? Here's again a lot of these brands getting our wave. We're making it popular by making it cool in the hood. And then that turns into like things you see in videos, then things you're seeing on film, right? With certain movies. And then now you're starting to see it where everybody around the globe is wearing that type of gear, right? Because of what we did.
Actually, I was just gonna take one step back. I actually skipped something. I think for me, the branding started because I'm going back to Green Acres Mall or
back to Queens.
Back to Queens. Now I'm reminiscing Toys R Us. I want to say the branding actually started probably with Saturday morning cartoons and seeing the toys,
right?
And like I want to say it kind of starts. I think brands and stuff, and your early introduction to brands starts with your parents. Like this stuff that my parents did or gave to me when you were a kid, because you don't have any buying power. You're probably not shopping. Like, you're not like kids today are on tablets and they know how to go online and shop and search. I didn't have I didn't have that. It's only when my pops would take me and my brother to Toys R Us, and then I got to browse and see what's out there.
Right.
But or like I knew, or you see the commercial and you'd be like, oh shit, like this toy is coming out. So that just to add to what I said earlier is kind of like my first introduction.
So start with family.
So it start with family, and then you go out and you like, then you get to the age where you start to develop your own sense of self, really, and then you start figuring out like, who am I? And like what brand, like you said in the beginning of the pod, what brands align with how do I want to present myself? What brands align with who I am? When people see me, because like we said earlier in the pod, we only have so much time to think about stuff in a day. You want to be able to see somebody and be like, oh, I know what their brand is because I can see how they dress. or how they're carrying themselves, or what drink they order, or what food they order. And it's like you just need these things. I forget what it is. I know it's like a psychological thing that helps us so we're not overthinking everything. But yeah, it started with family, then evolved. Then, like I said, I had an older brother. He's 13 years older. Similar to what you were saying, Rose. You know, he started putting me on.
Oh yeah.
I go in his room when he not home, and then he has like, you know, a Johnny Blaze, like a Fantastic Four poster. I'll never forget it. It's like he had it, and that kind of introduced me into Marvel and comics, and I started getting into that. Then like he was heavy into James Brown, so he had the records. So I started listening like James Brown. I was like, who's this guy? And he was big, and this is why Redman is always one of my top rappers, because he was in the Redman. So I was like, what is he talking about? So I go listen to Redman, and he put me on Tribe. You know, so it starts with parents, and then if you have an older sibling or older cousin or uncle, is like, yo, let me put you on to this.
Yeah.
And then so it starts, kind of guerrilla. It's like, you know.
I just want to circle back a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think you give yourself enough credit, because you said that when you were a kid, you didn't have any buying power, but you still had influence.
Yeah. That's bigger.
Right?
That's better than buying
it's like
power sometimes.
you had the influence because it was your request. You had the influence to have your parents actually make that call to action and buy something. Right. So don't take away your influence, Tony.
Well, I guess what I was trying to say is I didn't have no bread.
Well,
I had the cake. You know,
I mean, I look at the idea of my older siblings, right? Like, yeah, I got my parents, but I do think the influence part of Roseanne saying is very valid, because while my parents had the buying power, the real influence came from my siblings,
right?
Especially my oldest brother, who I would have to credit as like the guy could dress very well. Him and my sister Antonine, and they're the ones who basically were allowing me to go buy the gear I want, because they were dressing me like them, right? But he was the oldest, and it feel like he was kind of influential in terms of like the latest music and sometimes the latest gear, right? Then the twins came along, and I was into like the things that they was into is from like, you know, style and like
I like
art,
what you said,
right?
Because you know, we're all talking about it positively, but like when I think about it, it's such a blessing to have an older sibling or a cousin who has style, who you could be like, yo, let me take this from his closet, and that's how you start building your own. So like, I feel bad. No offense, I feel bad for people who don't have that person in their life who's like, yo.
But it don't necessarily come from your
family. Don't feel bad for me, bro.
But it don't have to come from family, because sometimes youth influence a lot.
I didn't know that was you. My bad, dog. You know what I'm saying?
But the youth will influence a lot of things. And it don't necessarily be your siblings. It can be your homies, or it can be your folks down the street. It can be anybody, right?
I'm going to say this, hands down, I'm the best dressed person out of my close circle growing up.
Because of having older?
No, just because I am. I'm just that guy. I just know how to put stuff together. Like that's it. Like,
I'm for sure in that category, like amongst growing up and like my friends. Like,
exactly.
I was always best dressed junior high school. Like it's
I'll say I wasn't always best dressed, but I always learn and build
but it's a matter of like taste.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's people who just want to fall in line and just saying like, okay, I don't really have an identity, but I'm not brave enough to think outside of the box and think creatively and put shit together. Right. I think that's a talent. We can just take a step back and say, you know what? I'm going to take a little risk.
Yeah, I'm going to try something.
I'm going to take a little risk, but at the same time, I'm going to, whether if I'm coordinating colors or whether if I'm going to, you know, make sure I'm adapting to the seasons, I'm going to come out with this fit, and this is going to be a representation of me. So I just want to circle back a little bit, because I know AD had called out the Timberland the moccasins, and I feel like what we had in New York at the time was the 40 below Timbs.
Yeah.
And then Wu-Tang with the Clarks. Right. So those are like big movements as it relates to like fashion. But I will say, to kind of land my plane a little bit with this topic, hip hop, seeing the popularity in hip hop, I think a lot of brands started to see like, okay, how do we get involved in this? How do we sign up? How do we get involved in this and promote our brands? Because I remember one of the first rappers to promote Tommy Hilfiger for me was Grand Poobah.
Grand Poobah, right.
Grand Poobah. And I remember he had a rhyme about, if Tommy don't send me my check, like it's over, it's out. And he was one of the first ones. I wouldn't say he wasn't the first with Polo, but he kind of popularized a lot of brands, cool brands.
I actually have 2 questions off of that.
Yeah.
One, do you think hip hop nowadays still has that same influence? And 2, wanted to point out, see that was also kind of the problem in the 90s, which is kind of what we do now with social media.
Right.
Is we'll promote some shit, put it on, then it blows up, and then we like, yo, and then we'll go back and say, yo, they owe me a check.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good question. Wait, what was your first question?
Do you think hip hop still has that influence?
Yeah, I think hip hop still has the influence. Absolutely. Like, it's the most influential genre of music. Like,
But I do think the artists are a little bit more intentional now. Like, if they're going to talk about something in the song, some kind of way, they're going to leverage that.
right. And I was just about to get to the point in the second question that you had. I feel like a lot of artists saw that. And then that's when you saw the pivot to Sean John, Rockaware. Like, a lot of artists and entertainers, right, started to say, like, you know what? Let me put my own brand out at a even was 50 Cent G Unit.
Yeah.
Fat
Right.
Farm.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that, to your point, it kind of got stale, and it's like, these checks ain't adding up as it relates to my influence. I could just do this shit myself. And
I
here we
disagree
are.
with your first point. I think the marketing nowadays, I'm 50-50 in the sense of, I think the marketing nowadays is so obvious that I think, and I could be speaking from a privileged point because I work in advertising, so like I see it, but to me it's just so obvious that when I see Shaq and a Kia, I'm like, dog, you're not driving a Kia.
But that wasn't my first point. I was
No. I was just saying entertainment, hip hop, but I'm saying like I don't think
You asked me if hip hop has the influence.
still has the influence.
I'm saying it absolutely does.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I actually think it's 50-50.
Well, that's what I was trying to say is like I think it's 50-50.
50-50.
But I was just gonna say I feel like I'm biased because when I see it, I kind of see because you saw the because I grew up. Well, we all grew up. We grew up in a time when the Hypnotic was bam. I didn't mean to hit the table, but bam, right in the video, the Nouveau. So I'm saying like you kind of see like, oh, it's obvious. The Cavassier, like talking about liquor brands. The Ace. Shout out to.
So, look at the recent Super Bowl. I mean, you can't. That was undeniably a hip hop Super Bowl.
Yeah, but what did he?
Didn't have to sell anything, but Apple sponsored that. Okay. Apple sponsored. It used to be Pepsi.
Maybe wide leg jeans.
I was gonna say,
We'll
like, was it flare jeans? Like he.
Yeah, I think it's flare. I don't know if it's flare or bell bottom or
He had on
considered
Nike.
bell bottom.
He had on Nike shoes.
I couldn't see him.
But now people
from
saw
what I
him.
understand,
You didn't see him.
Yeah,
but
I'm
people
just
saw
saying.
him. All right.
from what I understand, like those same jeans, like people went out and bought them.
They did.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
So,
salute.
so
Yeah.
it's like, I think.
Don't get me wrong, the jacket was fire. If I could find
It's
it,
a black
I'll
designer.
find that.
I got to go back and research, but it's a black designer, a black lady who designed that jacket.
The jacket was fire.
But I think that our last segment, to just kind of close out the episode, I want to play a little game here, right? So we talked about like influence, we talked about branding, talked about historical aspect of it. Rose brought up this idea of the mnemonic, right? And I want to play a game with you guys. So I'm going to play some jingles. I want to see if you guys can name that brand. Because again, brand is not just what you see, it's also what you hear. It's also what you feel.
Can we play them legally?
Yeah, well, you can do that.
Or are we just gonna say fuck it?
I'm going to say fuck it, man. You know, the ad bros. We do what the fuck we want. All right, you ready? Okay. So, sounds familiar?
Coca-Cola.
Got one? What you think?
I have no idea.
And the answer is Coca-Cola.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next one.
HBO.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know we was trying to rush to do it.
I
Yeah,
didn't
but
know.
it is
No, no,
HBO.
no,
Call out. It's a game, but you're not gonna win. You're not gonna win a bear now like that.
Man, there's no parameters in the eyebrows.
Sounds familiar?
HP.
Okay. What you think, Rose?
Yeah, HBO.
Intel.
Oh, Intel. Okay.
All right, let's go to the next one. That's a hard one.
I'm not quite sure.
Windows?
MasterCard.
Oh, damn.
Okay.
McDonald's.
Yeah, it sounds like McDonald's.
It's McDonald's.
Okay.
And
wait, before we move on, I got
Okay, go for some.
not mnemonics. Well, actually, the name of the brand is in the song. But
Okay,
I got
go
a couple
for it.
jingles. Maybe New York. These might be a little too New York, but
I mean, you know. I mean, yeah, the name is in that. And so I think it's just Barnes now. Cause then Celino, he kind of died in a
in
plane
an
crash.
accident. R.I.P. Celino, man.
Yeah,
All right, I got two more. Well, I'm not gonna play this whole thing, but
J.G. Wentworth.
Oh yeah.
now, all right. This one, I think Rose will probably know. I don't know if you know this one, AD. Hold up.
Oh, it's that time again.
Oh, ShopRite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
The can man.
Okay.
Can.
So
So speaking of, before we wrap up, speaking of when you're talking about back in the day, I remember this commercial when I was a kid. ShopRite commercial. It was probably local because I think ShopRite is more of a local supermarket.
It is. I think it's very.
I remember hearing it in my grandparents' crib in Harlem and Queens. So yeah,
I know
those
in
are my
Atlanta.
three.
I know in Atlanta we had this thing. You got it all at South DeKalb Mall. Like that was a jingle,
Yeah.
right? Like it was like the inherent nature of the brand was in the song itself,
Yeah.
right? And you got the songs that was jingles. Then you got like these audio logos, right? But again, brands actually had tone, they had sound, they had song.
You gotta bring jingles back, man.
Oh yeah, right. And it's funny since everybody now saying that they're a brand, it's kind of interesting because those aspects of branding is almost kind of like have disappeared, right? You don't hear jingles as much because more and more people listen to podcasts. They don't really listen to radio, right? You don't hear that the sound of a brand as much because a lot of people just don't look at TV,
Yeah.
right? So if you're not talking about brands being like that and it had sound, like what does that mean today? I don't know. This segment don't have to be that long, but I will say that I think if people really want to get into branding, they should be thinking about branding a little bit more holistic. It's not just the look, it's not just the tone, but what does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it?
Yeah, the five senses.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just talking about like mnemonics again. I mean, I'm thinking about ESPN. Do-do-do. Like they just keep. I think they've kind of simplified it, right? They've kind of removed the idea of jingles and paying someone to actually sing it and like all those legal.
Yeah, I think it's come to that. Yeah,
right.
for sure.
Like the
Yeah,
legal.
those jingles guys got paid.
Yeah, man.
The guy who did all the stuff for Mario got paid.
all the legal entities that's like involved in it, they said, let's just remove it and let's just have a sound that probably lasts for 3 seconds.
Yeah, because it's usually in perpetuity until they change their brand. But we will get into changing your brand, rebranding in the next episode.
Yeah, and I think that ends this pretty well, man. I think this is a great time to have Rose sign us off.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Abros, with another great episode. And as we all know, there's no soft talk when it comes to telling the truth. We out.
And that's
sir.
our brand. Thank you very much, people. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ad Bros podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your crew. Catch us next time for more insights and creativity, only on the Ad Bros podcast, powered by Caffeine Media Network.